All right. Good evening. We are back again tonight. Tonight we have Brandon Johnson from Oregon. Brandon is a dad, and he's just gonna share his story and also have the opportunity to talk about children growing up. The future of children growing up without both parents actively involved in their lives. We want to look at some of the impacts, the effects. As they grow up and when they become adults, the potential problems that they will encounter. And so, Brendan, we are very pleased to have you on with us tonight. And Bill, as always, thank you as well.
Thanks for having
Um,
me on, Ben.
but to our audience tonight, please, if you can share our link, to your friends and families, or if you have a friend or anybody that is going through, divorce, separation, anybody that's caught up in parental alienation, or any child that is growing up without both of their parents involved in their lives. I believe that what we're doing is very informative, and people benefit from it. It's raising a lot of awareness, and people are asking questions. People are becoming more informed on how to go about handling certain situations as they go through these difficult times. Going through this is it's not easy. I've been there. Bill has been there. Brendan has been there. The costs, the unnecessary expenses that comes with it. No parents need to go through this, and no child deserves to go through this. Every child, do have a right. They have a right to have access to both parents, and I think it's not appropriate for one parent to, withhold the child and deny them from the other parent. If they were fit before divorce, there's no reason why they should be denied access to that parent. And so, thanks to you both for taking the time to join our discussion tonight. Bill, anything you wanna say before we bring Brendan on?
No, I just thank you, Brandon, for taking the time to come on and speak with
The
us and
audio,
share your
the,
experiences.
the mic is. I don't know if you can hear me.
My mic is low.
I think the mic. Yeah, I think your mic is on mute, Bill. Okay.
How can you hear me now?
Still can't hear. Brendan, can you hear me though? I can't hear Bill.
Yes.
Oh, perfect, perfect. Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
All
You're
right.
good. So, anything you want to share before we go on to Brendan?
I was just thanking Brandon for taking the time to come on and speak with us, and we there. I think he just
Yeah, it's just back on. Yeah, awesome. So, Brendan, I know you're a dad, father of uh, four children, um, and I know you've gone through the process that many of us have been through. Fighting through the courts, to have equal amount of time with the children, just as much as the mother gets. Um, how did it all start with you? Going through the court process and up to today. How did it all start? I hope I hope you can hear us, Brendan.
looks like Brandon's frozen again.
Yeah, I'm just gonna try messaging um, messenger to see if he will get. Okay, okay. I think he's gonna log back in again.
Yeah, he'll probably come right
Yeah,
back on there.
yeah. But Brendan was sharing with us, how it all started with him. I wanted him to, share that with the audience.
Yep.
And the reason being that there are, for many of us, that's how it starts, right? things start to be normal. As soon as lawyers, the court gets involved, it becomes very ugly. And some, it doesn't, go that way, unfortunately. Um, but we, he made a comment earlier on that most parents, the alienators would choose to have children spend a lot of time on electronics and TV instead of having them spend time with their dads. I thought that was very interesting, and it's very true. A lot of kids going through uh, separation or the custody battle. Basically, you find a lot of them on electronics, unfortunately, because that's what some of these other parents uses to distract them, and also just to keep them busy. Yeah. So I'm just gonna see if Brendan is coming back on.
Yeah, let's hope he can get back on there. And
Okay, he said he wasn't getting any sound, so I'm just gonna just message him here to see if I can get him going. Um, but Bill, anything that came to mind whilst he was
yeah, I'm just looking at this Facebook user who keeps posting all these things as an expert in PA. Recognize the posts. It seems like it's Joe Goldberg, maybe. Um, if it's Joe, I'd, I'd rather see his name up there instead of Facebook
actually.
user and all these comments that you and I are seeing come across here on the podcast.
I'm
Yes,
gonna go on Facebook to see.
Joe Goldberg. He's a lawyer in Florida,
Oh, okay.
and he runs a number of groups, and he posted www.parentalalienation.ca up here, and while he has been involved in it is Joe. Well, he has been involved with some experts. He did put out a post recently that parental alienation, some of the things he's saying are against the recognition of alienation. And not a lawyer, consultant. Okay, sorry, Joe, my mistake. Um, that there is my mistake. Oh, there's Brandon.
Yeah, Brendan's back on. I hope you can hear us, Brendan.
I can hear you guys now.
Okay, perfect,
Excellent.
perfect. I'm happy you're back. But thanks again, Brendan, for taking the time to join us tonight. Um, uh, Bill, were you finished with what you were saying earlier? Before I
Yeah, I was just going on about the comments that Facebook user, which I believe, and he did acknowledge that it is Joe Goldberg. I thought he was a lawyer. He's a consultant. Um, he does have a number of Facebook groups, pages, and has been associated with some events surrounding parental alienation. But again, he's not a medical expert or professional, and a lot of the information he's shared and just the posts here tonight on this broadcast are a little confusing to people that aren't fully aware of everything surrounding parental alienation. So yeah, I don't think we'll
so
share any of his posts. We lost Brandon again.
oh, yeah, it's back on again. I think it's probably his internet connection.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's
Tell you what, I don't
okay.
know if it's on my end or
Yeah, I think it's your connection.
not.
I think it's your
the
internet.
The weather has been extremely bad and snowing like crazy over here.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, I apologize. The last couple days it's been snowing here and we're not really used to it.
No worries.
Yeah.
No worries. No worries.
You get
Um,
used to it if you get enough.
yeah. Yeah. So, Brendan, how did it all start?
Let's
With
see if
you.
I can even step up here if this is better. Let's see if this might be a little better.
Yeah, it is. I think it is. I think it's your internet connection. That's
Yeah, yes, I do believe it might be. I'm not quite sure exactly why, but
Mhm. Okay. I think we're good now. No, it's better. I can hear you very well. Uh, yeah.
okay.
Okay. I was just asking how
Good.
it all started with you going through, the process of having to fight, to be present in the lives of your kids.
I'm sorry. You were kind of breaking up in your question. Can you repeat that one more time?
Yes, I was asking how it started with you having to fight, to be present in the lives of your kids. I know you've been through the court process, and we just want to know how it all started.
Oh, he's dropped again.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think it's internet connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because it keeps freezing. Uh, okay, I'm just messaging him to check his internet. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Joe. I'm aware of the work of William Burnett. I'm a member of the Parental Alienation Study Group that was founded by William Burnett, and I'm also a member of other groups. If this is something you'd like to discuss,
I can send him a link to join as well.
yes. Well, he can either come on and share his opinions and thoughts,
Yeah.
or
So I
instead of
just yeah, I just sent a link to the studio.
yeah,
If I know you are very active with your messages, and if you want to come on live, to share your thoughts and opinion, by all means, we will love to have you on. So I just sent a link. Just click on the link, and then it will bring you into the studio,
yeah.
and we'll have you active. All right.
Anyway, he seemed to be sharing a lot of what was one of the statements here.
Mhm.
PA theory lacks scientific rigor, and that's not true. The 5-factor model was developed by Dr. Stephen Miller, and it was peer reviewed by two different groups and found to be 92.6 and 93.1%
Mhm.
effective at recognizing and diagnosing cases of parental alienation. Again, they're both around 93. I can't remember if those were the exact numbers, but they were to a decimal point, and one was a little over 93%, one was 92 point something percent, close to 93. So they were both in the very
Mhm.
low 90s for effectiveness at recognizing and diagnosing parental alienation. And that was by that the 5-factor model was developed by Dr. Stephen Miller, and it's since been refined by Amy Baker, and I forget who she collaborated with when they developed the 4-factor model that dropped the identifier or indicator of rejection of a parent, um, because um, if the child isn't rejecting a parent, but the other 4 indicators are there, it's still a case of parental alienation. They're just learning how to hide the indicators to recognize parental
Mhm.
alienation better, because a lot of the people that are alienated or perpetrators of alienation follow these support groups and learn from them. So about half the people uh, we found over the years that follow these support groups, half are there for support, half are there to learn how to further abuse the targets, the target parents.
Mhm.
And they try to enlist the help of many of the admins and moderators and other people within the group. And you need to have people that are capable of recognizing the pattern of behaviors that these people display, so they can't infect the group and cause problems for the people that are searching for answers and support by confusing them with conflicting information.
Mhm. Yeah. So I sent him the link by email, and then reposted the link
Yep.
on the Facebook platform as well.
Mhm.
So he should be joining us any moment, um, any moment from now. Um, okay. I haven't even had a chance to read much of what he's posting, but it would be nice to have him on to
Yep.
sort of speak um, based on the information that he has. And um, yeah, okay. So Brendan will most likely not be able to come back on because I think he's using his mobile data,
Okay.
and that's why it keeps cutting off and freezing. But in any case, we will have him back on um, most likely in March. So you just want to confirm the dates that he's available, and then we can definitely bring him back on. So go ahead, Bill. You were sharing something on the post.
Oh, just yeah, just tonight, Facebook user was putting in a lot of comments in our field, our chat field here, and I recognize the material being shared as material shared by Joe Goldberg on some of his pages and information. Um, Question for you guys here. If I request termination of my parental rights in view that I am erased from my daughter's lives, will I be ordered to continue paying child support? Legal questions. We can't really give
Hi,
you any
Joe.
real legal answers. Hello, but yeah, if it's been court ordered for child support to be paid, then yeah, you're going to end up paying it. And the only way to get it changed is to get in front of a judge and have the court make a different order.
Mhm. But here's the thing, though. I wouldn't really encourage you to give up on your parental rights because your child needs you, right?
Yes.
Um, every child needs a father. Right? I was dealing with this afternoon in church, where a father has been literally given 50-50, and he doesn't want it. And here's the case: there are so many of us that are fighting for shared parenting. Um, basically what we are saying is that the child wants you, but you don't want to be in the life of the child, and that is not right. The child didn't ask to come into this world. We all have a responsibility to be actively involved in their lives, and so whomever is asking that question, I will strongly encourage you to do what you have to do to be present in the life of the child. The child needs you more than you can imagine.
All right.
How you
So
doing, Joe?
Joe, you managed to make it
Yeah.
on there. How you doing,
I
Joe?
did. Thank you.
So
Hi, I did. Hi, Bill.
how you doing, Joe? So
Hi, Ben.
I thought
Hi,
this would be
Joe.
a lot easier than trying to third party share all the information you were trying to share in the chats there. So it's a lot easier if you want to talk and have questions answered or share information. Please come on. That's what we're looking for, is people to come in and talk and speak about these issues and share information.
Thank you.
Rob.
Um, well, I appreciate the opportunity. There's a lot of interest in parental alienation and parental alienation theory, and there are a lot of people in a very desperate way looking for answers. One of the things I'd like to express is for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been really disenchanted by the fact that there haven't been very efficacious treatment models to repair the parent child relationship or to answer the question what is uh, possibly an alternative explanation for the child's rejecting behavior. And for the last several decades, the um, best explanation has been parental alienation theory.
Yep.
But I have been looking outside my lane um, for answers. I haven't been looking at just the literature in parental alienation, but I've been trying to understand human behavior as it applies to children and adolescents to find a more efficacious and safe model for treating the dynamic. And that led me into a lot of different areas in psychology and medicine,
Mhm.
including topics like self control theory and self regulation and stress effects and the unconscious mind. And there really hasn't been a critique of parental alienation theory since Janet Johnston's model in 2001 on the alienated child, where she talked about some of the factors that she felt um, pointed to the simplification of blame on the alienating parent. And so since then, over the last 20 plus years, there's been voluminous literature in other overlapping fields of psychology and psychiatry that help explain and account for not just the situational reasons why children might reject a parent, but there are, I found what I believe is a far better explanation for the rejecting behavior. And I found that explanation in dissociative disorders.
Okay, so you're
Uh,
starting to look into Gabor Mate material.
well, dissociative disorders also has another comorbidity, which is self-injuring behavior, and that is also a feature of a lot of children that are in the severe stages of alienation. Um, Anybody that cares to look at non-suicidal self-injuring disorder and looks at the criteria of the A through F criteria will see that there's a very close, if not identical, match to those symptoms in alienated children. The one area that I'm sure people would disagree with is the first criteria, which is the self-injuring is of a physical nature. But this is also a disorder in the DSM for further study. And one of the areas that I would argue needs to be integrated is a psychological component, because I would say that any child who had a very loving and bonded relationship with a parent who they decided to reject for an unknown rather than an unjustified reason, who who in the absence of any abuse or neglect, who would remain loving and caring and supportive of that child in spite of its rejection towards them, is not a normal behavior of a child. That to me is symbolic of a self-injuring behavior.
Yes, rejection of a parent is a trauma indicator. Um, it's again dependent on the age. There's rejection, and then you have estrangement. Now, estrangement is completely different and opposite of the rejection. Rejection of a parent is for an invalid reason, and they cannot articulate the reason why they express fear or they reject the parent and they do not wish to see them, other than there's a fear and they don't want to see them. So that there is again that there is not something that the child can articulate or voice as why they have this unrational or irrational fear, or they do not wish to see that parent. So this has been created in the mind of the child. This is the fingerprints left by coercive and controlling behaviors by a manipulator,
Yeah,
and
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 then you
so
have
I would also mention that many children in severe stages of alienation who have been evaluated by clinicians and interviewed have frequently been asked about a period of time in the child's life when that rejected parent had good times with the child. And the evaluator would ask the child, well, can you recall having a good relationship with your mother or father in the past? And the child would
Yeah.
say no. And then the evaluator might present some photos or some videos to contradict the child's opinion.
Yes.
And even still, the child would continue to say, well, I don't remember that, or
Yes.
I can't recall that. But
Yes.
that's not something that is being fully investigated by parental alienation theory. That is being under
Well, it is.
investigated.
That's
That
cult
is a condition
indoctrination.
called amnestic dissociation, right?
Yeah. That's cult
Dissociative amnesia,
indoctrination.
right, Bill?
Yes, it's cult indoctrination to a T. They don't remember their true memories because they're being manipulated and coerced. And you're
That's
right.
not
It's a
cognitive
dissociative.
dissonance, though.
Hmm?
That's not cognitive dissonance.
No, no, it's not. Cognitive dissonance is another thing. That would be where the judges they tell themselves that they're making the right decisions in these cases, and they are really protecting a child by denying them access to one parent. And this isn't hurting the children, so they can sleep at night. They're basically don't want to acknowledge that they may be making a mistake. They can't really tell the difference, but they're going to make this decision anyway, and so they can sleep better for themselves at night.
Right. And do you understand dissociative disorders, Bill? You have to forgive me because I don't know you well.
No,
So I can't
and no,
really,
I'm not. I'm,
how you might know about
I'm not as familiar
dissociative
with
disorders.
the
Could you clarify?
I'm not as familiar with dissociative disorders, but I do know that if you look at Gabriel Maté and his work, they say adults who are now being diagnosed with ADHD, that's a wrong diagnosis. These adults don't suffer from ADHD. They suffer from um, coping mechanisms they developed as children to develop with the the alienation they suffered from or the dysfunctional family unit, and where they had a situation that would create a fight or flight instinct. But since they were children, they were not able to run from these situations. So they kind of just tuned out. And that was their way of coping with things that they couldn't run or fight with, such as their parents fighting. So now you have adults that have learned whenever there's conflict, they can't resolve it and they kind of tune out. And adults are getting diagnosed with ADHD left and right. When Gabriel Maté is saying that this is a false diagnosis, they don't really have ADHD. They have a problem with resolving a conflict. And this is a coping mechanism they developed as a child that no longer works for them as an adult.
Ben, I don't mean to monopolize this conversation with Bill. So,
Oh no, no, I'm listening in. So, um, so you guys go ahead.
the dissociative disorders diagnosis is something that can only be done by a very highly skilled expert in that field.
Yes.
Requires there are some psychometric tests, but if somebody isn't an expert in that field and knows the subtle ways to interview the child, it would be very hard to detect this associative disorder because these symptoms come and go, and they're
You're right.
easily triggered, and they are basically the coping mechanism for the child to escape and avoid the psychological emotional pain that something like a high conflict divorce with parents,
Yes.
with a completely dysregulated and dangerous parent, could cause that child to constantly move in and out of altered states.
Yes.
And
And
unfortunately, this is not even looked for in custody evaluations. Custody evaluations are only looking for best interest factors. They're not looking for the root problem within the child.
they don't even know what they're looking for, and they don't know what they're looking at. They don't know how to assess this. Like you said, most people, if they're not trained, they can't recognize what's going on. So if I have a burst blood vessel in my brain and I go to my general practitioner doctor and say, I got a headache, can you do something? They'll send me to the hospital for a CAT scan, but she's not an expert. So they get the CAT scan back. And if they don't send me to an expert to read this, I'm going to end up dying if I have a burst blood vessel, because she can't look at it and make a diagnosis of what she's reading. And that's what the courts do. They send people in, like people that just don't have a medical degree or able to make a medical diagnosis. And even psychiatrists and psychologists who are supposed to be able to recognize this, if they don't have any experience dealing with these pathologies or recognizing the patterns that lead to the children displaying these symptoms, they can make a wrong decision. And they do so a lot of the time, according to Dr. Stephen Miller. He conducted a study for the state of Massachusetts in 2012 or 2014 around parental alienation, and his determination was that courts made wrong decisions 95% of the time in high conflict cases. They did not know how to recognize the difference between the abuser and the victim of abuse, and they aligned with the abuser 95% of the time.
And misdiagnosis is the primary problem still today.
Yes.
And sadly, many things that look like parental alienation are really a dissociative disorder.
That it's again, you might have more information on that than me. I'm more familiar with parental alienation, the diagnostic indicators that will recognize that a child is suffering from child psychological abuse, such as the rejection of a parent, the coercive and controlling behaviors, and the 5 behaviors the child will display from the manipulation and coercion that's being used on them. And then the shared persecutory delusion that is created, where they have a false fear or false memories of their parent, the target parent.
I usually don't talk this openly about what we're talking about on this show. I'll be honest with you, because I've been studying and researching this independently for the last 5 years. Thanks to COVID, I've had a lot of free time on my hands to work from home and study night and day on something I'm very passionate about. And I can tell you there's some really there's a silver lining. There's some great news in this for parents and extended family members who believe that they're dealing with the parental alienation dynamic. And that is that if there's testing done to confirm or disconfirm a dissociative disorder, this would eliminate so much time and suffering and money spent in litigation issues in family courts. Because if instead of fighting for custody, instead of fighting to prove parental alienation, if parents understood, like when I tell them as a client, let's suspend the issue of custody and visitation time right now. What we have to do is we have to find out if this kid has a dissociative disorder. So let's file a motion for that. If we can't get the other party to agree to it by an agreed order or by consent, because if we confirm the diagnosis, the evaluator is going to be making all kinds of new recommendations to the court. But more importantly, and far more importantly, is that the child will get treatment for the targeted problem instead of being thrown all over the place into reunification therapy and intensive parental alienation interventions and psychoeducational approaches that are bullshit.
Joe, I'll share a case with you that I'm aware of that's happening right here in New Brunswick. In fact, right in St. John. I live in Grand Bay, Westfield, just outside the city limits. And this case is happening in the courthouse in St. John. And it has been going on for 7 years. And a VOC has been ordered by a judge to happen in the case for this family. And now, this is a case of alienation as far as I'm concerned. And this VOC, voice of the child, that has been ordered by the judge is set to be conducted by a social worker, and a clinical. She's not just your social worker, but she's a social worker, and I think she's got her master's in social work. So 2 separate degrees in social work, but again, no medical no medical ability to make a diagnosis of the case. Again, I refer this to like having an aneurysm or a heart problem. You don't go see your general practitioner doctor to get help with these things. You go to a specialist that specializes in your brain or your heart, so they can recognize the special things that is needed. Not just anyone can do what a heart specialist does or what a brain specialist does. They're, these are people that have specific knowledge of a certain area. And what the courts are doing are trying to get general practitioners to come in and assess these cases. And the reason why they're not getting proper assessments is because the people don't recognize what they're looking at. Like you're saying, if this is a case of dissociation disorder, then most times when you have a social worker in there, they can't make that diagnosis.
I think most psychologists can't make that diagnosis.
Yes. Again, you need a specialized person. Like I said, back to the
Most
brain surgeon.
custody evaluators couldn't make that diagnosis.
No.
Unless you're going to the International Society of Trauma and Dissociative Disorders, you're not going to find an expert that could make that call.
Right.
And if you don't have a consultant working with a lawyer on a case of this nature, you're not going to find the right people that can expedite the process of getting the child correctly evaluated, correctly treated, so that the domino effect of repairing the parent-child relationship can then fall back into place. But these things have to be done in a way that precede any other approach to making decisions at parent time, because there's bad information on the internet, in social media groups, and from opinions from so many people who say, fight for your rights and do this and do that and
Yes.
document this and go here, and just too much garbage. And it's not only hurting people, it's substantially hurting children. And it's
Yes.
making
It's
it
child abuse.
worse, not making it better.
I call it state-sponsored child abuse. They're creating a situation to allow children to be abused and suffer from these pathologies. And instead of making decisions in the best interest of the children, this VOC is being done to hear what the children want. These two children are supposed to voice their concerns and say
What?
the children involved in that case with the VOC. The judge believes that the children can make the decisions in the best interest of their lives, and whatever they choose is what the decision the judge is going to go with moving forward in this case. Can you imagine that? A judge.
Well, it happens. It happens too often.
It does. It happens every day. It happens every day.
So just going back to, I have a question here. We see a lot of clinicians and clinical social workers, and social workers themselves actually trying to make decisions for children based on these associative disorders. Now, if they are not trained, if they are not trained to do that, how do judges confidently take that into consideration in making judgments?
That's a pretty easy question. The judges, they don't know the difference between a social worker, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a medical professional, and anyone that provides them with a report that has a couple of initials and numbers or letters after their name. They take it as an expert in that field, even though, like I said, if you go to someone and they don't have the ability to make the correct diagnosis of your situation, then that whole process you've gone through has been a waste of time, because they're going to lead people to believe the wrong thing is happening just because they don't have the knowledge or ability to make a correct diagnosis of the situation. So they can't put a treatment plan in place. That's what needs to happen first. You need to have a diagnosis of the situation so you can move forward with treatment of the situation. And there's a huge failure by almost everyone consistently where they're not making a real diagnosis or correct diagnosis. Now, Dr. Richard Warshak, he was involved in a case in Canada around 2008 where he came in and testified, and the judge ordered the two children that were involved in that case to be flown to Texas to undergo reunification therapy with Dr. Warshak, because reunification therapy doesn't currently exist because parental alienation doesn't currently exist as a recognized diagnosis. So you can't treat something that doesn't exist as a diagnosis. Now, parental alienation exists as a construct, and as a construct, a judge in Canada in 2022, out in BC, they just made a court order after numerous voice of the child's assessments of the children by therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, whatever it may be. I looked at the file; it was huge, and they'd been in court for years. And the judge in this case chose to award custody to one parent over the other, stating that parental alienation does not need to be recognized because it is not a medical diagnosis. So we don't need a medical professional to come in and tell us that parental alienation is happening. The judge said parental alienation is a legal construct, and as a legal construct, and me as a judge, I can recognize the behaviors of parental alienation because they are self-evident to be viewed. There is a pattern. I see this pattern, and I'm saying that this is parental alienation. I'm awarding custody of this party over the other. And that was the decision of one judge here in Canada, 2022, British Columbia.
Second opinion.
Again, you got judges who believe they can make they don't need medical decisions or medical experts to come in and weigh in these cases. They want to try to use legal methods to argue that we can make a decision on this without medical help, and that's what the judge said in the decision. Which is
it would be nice if everybody could be just a little bit more humble about the certainty about what this problem is about. Okay?
Well, that's it. People don't know. And the judges that are currently sitting on the bench have been there. They haven't been in school for, let's say, 30 years. Now, parental alienation has just been gaining recognition since it was recognized in 1987 by Richard Gardner and called parental alienation syndrome, where he recognized 8 behaviors associated with alienating behaviors associated with what he called parental alienation syndrome. It has since been revived to 5-factor model and a 4-factor model. As such, it's easier to diagnose, and it's gaining more recognition, and more people are accepting of this construct of parental alienation. It's just that the people that are learning about it are the ones that are in school now, not the ones that are on the bench or the ones that are currently working in the process. They never learned about this. So there's going to be a lag in real time from people learning about parental alienation and the recognition of the patterns to having decisions made. Any cases I've seen where parental alienation was recognized, and there are a number of them around the world, it has taken roughly between 8 and 10 years for the parties to, for the judge to finally recognize the pattern of behavior. Sorry, I just had a phone call there. I had to swipe away. Sorry about that, guys.
Hey, Joe, anything to add, Joe?
Well, to go back to really the point about whether there's scientific rigor in parental alienation theory, it's been criticized since its inception. Okay. And there's never been, when you think about scientific studies that involve psychology or medicine, it's really been a revolution in science since the start of fMRI technology, brain scanning technology. You can hardly find a good study in psychiatry or medicine that doesn't include fMRI technology. But there's never been even one study in the history of parental alienation theory involving an fMRI study. And why is that important? That's important because you can tell what are the structures of the brain that are impacted when they're being when a subject is being tested, and it's hard to dispute fMRI technology because you can see what's happening within the individual.
Yeah, I've seen some of the brain scans of children who have been subjected to normal, loving households, and others that have been raised without both parents and not a household. And I've seen the brain scans, and there is quite a significant difference in the growth and development of children based on the environment they grew up in. I don't know if it was studied directly with and linked with parental alienation, but it might have been an adverse childhood experience.
Well, what I can tell you is that there have been fMRI scanning technology studies involving dissociative disorders,
Yeah.
and lo and behold, those very brain structures that are showing evidence of a dissociative disorder um, have been found. And if you were to examine a child that you believe is a victim of alienation and subject them to the testing, uh, I believe that one day they'll find that there's clear evidence of a dissociative disorder in the profile of alienated children.
And that could be, and that's a good theory, and
But that's for future studies. You know,
that
we're not there
that's
yet.
great. That's because again, when you look at parental alienation, this is like the developmental stage of either borderline or narcissistic personality disorders, and other personality disorders or children learn sociopathic behaviors because this is what they see and this is what they grow up in, and that's that they grow up doing what they learn.
But I'm using that just as an extreme example. You don't really
Yeah.
need fMRI technology to identify dissociative disorder in children or adolescents.
No, no, like that's like I said, it's a great theory, and I'd have to learn more about it. I haven't gone as much into dissociative disorders, but again, that would be kind of where Gabor Mate and his materials coming in, where he's saying that a lot of people that are adults that are being labeled as having disorders, these aren't disorders, these are unresolved childhood issues or things that they suffered from their childhood, and they developed coping mechanisms for dealing with what they were going through that no longer work for them. So now they're being diagnosed as adults with these disorders when it's really a failed pattern or system they developed as a child that is no longer working for them.
One of the things that I found over 2 decades of working on cases involving alienated children are the amazing numbers of children in this population who are self-injuring.
Yes.
Self-injuring by the definition of self-injuring, self-harm today, where there's bodily tissue damage.
Yep.
And I always thought, gee, that's a strange coincidence, isn't it? How is it that so many children in the severe stages, or more moderate to severe stages, have this comorbidity? Why is that something that parental alienation theory seems to be so non-curious about? And why, after finding that children have an amnestic condition where they have memory gaps, they
Yeah.
can't remember having a good relationship with a parent?
Yeah.
That's not ordinary forgetfulness, Bill.
No, it's not. It's not. That's again, that would be along the lines of cult indoctrination and brainwashing. That's exactly what it is. Now, dissociative disorder, that would be you've gone a little farther in this than trying to recognize the pattern of parental alienation and looking at the mental health aspects of this. Me as a parent, I don't care who can prove it or who can show what or what it's called. I just want somebody to help my children and help me protect them, and that's what parents are looking for. And there's a lot of specialists who are people that are coming in here, social workers saying they're specialists. There was a gentleman in Vancouver, or maybe not Vancouver, it was British Columbia. He had testified in like somewhere around 40 cases and is an expert. And after they reviewed his work, someone, like someone said he's not an expert, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And they went back and reviewed all the cases he had testified at, and they found that he wasn't using proper diagnostic methods or techniques to come to his conclusions in the cases. And so they were going to arrest this guy, so they forced him to retire to drop the criminal investigation against him. And I can't remember if it was 36 or it was near 40 cases that he had worked in as an expert in parental alienation, and he just didn't have the qualifications. And most of the cases he didn't use proper testing techniques, and he made things worse. And that's what's happening today, and what's still happening. They don't have proper people making a diagnosis, and without a proper diagnosis, they can't get treatment.
Well, I want to add, just for emphasis, that I'm not the first person to identify this as the root problem.
No.
I'm not the first person in dissociative disorders to bring this into the parental alienation field. There was one person before me named Dr. Allison Miller, who published an article 30 years ago about parental alignment. I forget the exact title of the article, but it was about parental alienation and how she identified it as a dissociative disorder 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I only found this article because I subscribe to a platform of scientific journal articles, and I did a search and I came up with this article. And when I found the article, I was astounded, but I couldn't find the citation date of the article. I was really curious. So I contacted Dr. Miller. I got in touch with her. I said, we had a really engaging conversation, and we continue to have these conversations. And I said, Allison, I had no idea that somebody before me had come up with the notion that parental alienation looks like a dissociative disorder. And yet here is your article 30 years ago. I said, what was the site? Why didn't you publish this? What was the date of the publication? I said, and she says, well, I never published it, Joe. I only uploaded it to the platform. I never actually published the article.
Okay.
And I said, well, when did you write it? She said about 25 years ago, 30 years ago. So I'm working on an article now that I hope will be published in the summer about dissociative disorders, an alternative explanation for parental alienation theory in children and adolescents. That's going to be the title of the article.
Okay.
And I think that it could not only help change the course of thinking about the theory, but I'm already working with clients in cases right now, with lawyers on cases in a number of states, where we've recalibrated the approach to having the children assessed for dissociative disorders so that they could get the right treatment.
Yes.
And,
again, that would be
recommendations.
Not anyone could make that assessment. And you're right. You need the proper people in to make the right assessment. Otherwise, it gets missed. And the situation will continue on for years. So I agree. And if that's one of the diagnostic tools you can get in there to help people, that would be great.
I can't begin to tell you how grateful these clients are, because for the longest time, they've tried everything they know with financial resources to afford it, and haven't been able to come close to understanding the dynamic the way I've been able to help explain it to them. And they feel so relieved to know that it's not like the child really is rejecting them. It's just don't say and do anything to escape and avoid that emotional pain.
That's right. It's a coping mechanism. They can't deal with the trauma of the reality of the situation. So that there is how they they deal with it. It's they get angry, they lash out. That's not their behavior necessarily how they feel, but that's how they've been programmed to behave, so that is what people want them to see. Again, this is coercive and controlling behavior, manipulation, and it's teaching children to fear and hate, and that's just wrong. It's wrong, and the parents would do that needs to be recognized, because when they're rejecting a parent, if the parent isn't beating them, there's no real reason for it, then it's been planted there by someone. And you're right,
So
they can have many different disorders that can develop from it.
Here's how I help. Here's how I help people understand it. So they don't think that it's entirely the alienating parent's fault. Okay, there's plenty of fault to go around here. The 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 parent who's being rejected, who is trying to do everything as sensitively as they know, to be careful not to step over the line. They don't understand that they don't have to do anything other than just try to be nice for it to be a trigger, because these children are already at the level where the glass is filled to the brim.
Yeah.
So the very next drop of any contribution from either parent could cause the dysregulation, the stress effect that will
Yeah.
create the need for this dissociative state.
Yeah.
So
What
either parent can be responsible for causing this to become a worse problem, but they don't know that. They
well,
don't
actually,
understand that even innocent comments can take the kid over the edge, because that's how sensitive they are to these stress effects. And if you study the scientific research over the last decade, stress effects, top-down regulation and bottom-up regulation in the brain flips when the stress effects become severe. And when it's
yeah,
chronic stress, it's even worse.
yes, I know what you're
It
saying
doesn't
there.
take
It's
very
like
much. That's all I'm saying.
it,
It doesn't take
yeah,
very much at all for the child to flip.
no,
so
and parents that are alienated, they have to learn how to make the connection with their child and help them through this process, because the child is being abused throughout this process. And you're right, both parents could abuse them. They don't even know what they're doing. It. One of the things that most parents that are targeted that do to their children that they think is good and helpful is telling them that they love them, especially when, say, they're on the phone when the other parent could be right next to them. So if you're on a phone call with your child and you're telling them they love them and they're standing next to the other parent, they can't respond without being attacked or abused by that parent. So that puts them in an awkward position. So the more it creates a pattern where every time you tell that child you love them, they'll have a reaction to it. Well, they're afraid. Again, this is the cult indoctrination and the the coercion and manipulation. So parents, while they are desperate to let the children know they love them, by doing so, you're right, they could inadvertently be causing them or creating this pattern where they remove or try to get away from that, depending on the situation. You always have to let the children know you love them unconditionally and they're there. That's the only real way to help them. Telling them you love them every 2 minutes, every phone call is not necessary. And being able to show and display a loving, caring environment and place for the children to be a safe environment for them to express their feelings and not reject their feelings, even if they're angry. If they're angry, they're allowed to be angry, but you
so
need to help them understand why they're angry and overcome their anger.
so Bill and Joe, just a quick question: how does this affect
I, I, I just, I just,
children?
I,
Okay. Go ahead, Joe.
I just have to say, my wife is coming home in a few minutes, and I have a date with my wife, so I'm going to have to cut this short. As
No
much as I
problem.
love jumping in, and as much as I really appreciate you letting me be on the show, and make a contribution to what you're talking about, and thank you so much for that. I really do appreciate it, and respect your views very much. because progress cannot be made, in a vacuum. It has to
You're right.
have dissenting opinions, and it takes a lot of work to make progress. So thank you for the opportunity today to be on the show, have a little input. Now I got to get back to my wife,
No problem.
or I'll be
Thank
in
you,
the
Joe.
doghouse.
All
So
right. Thank you
thank
very
you
much for
again
Thank
taking
you.
for
part,
Yeah.
Joe.
everything.
Thank you
Nice
so
Thank
much.
you.
talking to you both.
Same
Yes,
here.
you too, Joe. Nice to meet you.
Bye
Thank
for
you.
now.
Next video. All right.
Take care. Yes, Ben.
Yeah.
What were you gonna?
Yeah. So the question I was going to ask actually uh, was that how does this affect children in their adult stages? Um, because they are being manipulated at a very young age.
You're right. It's now again we're back to like theory of Balbi and Minuchin, and you've got the guys that developed attachment theory and people that recognized that children learn proper attachments and grow and develop properly in a loving, nurturing environment. If they're abused or neglected, they don't grow or develop normally. And this is where like they will grow up and they don't develop if they don't develop proper attachment bonds at a young age, they'll never develop them
Right.
because it's a developmental stage. And if they miss that stage, even as they get older, um, it creates like a domino effect. They miss other developmental stages, and these, if you end up growing up with these missing these developmental stages, it becomes unresolved trauma. And the only way you can overcome unresolved trauma is with a good therapy and someone who can really understand and help you go through everything that you went through to understand, to recover. Most people don't. Anyone that suffers from narcissistic or borderline personality disorder, they don't go for help because there's nothing wrong with them. It's everyone else. And two examples of them that are very highlighted, very public, and both parties have been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder are Angelina Jolie and Amber Heard. And you can
Is
see
there
what's going on, what happened in both their lives in both their cases. It's they went through their entire lives with an undiagnosed personality disorder and were very successful. And they both ended up getting in marriages that just could not exist with that disorder. Now, that's the thing. These people, they have a disorder, and while they're very engaging, they're erratic and emotional, and they're not trusting. And because they're not trusting, uh, they're more likely to reject you. And what you do is end up becoming or being involved in a dysfunctional dynamic in a relationship with them, where there's a cycle, four steps in the cycle of rejection. Um, I can't remember the four steps right now, but it's basically it's like Stockholm syndrome, where the adults who were held in captivity for a week by terrorists who kidnapped them and held them hostage. After a week, where the hostages they spoke with them, they were kind with them, showed them
yeah.
small kindness and gestures, um, so that when people came to rescue the hostages from the terrorists, the hostages were standing up trying to protect the terrorists from the rescuers. These are adults that have been manipulated in a very short period of time. So just imagine being in a relationship with a person like this for years and how much damage they can do to you and how much damage can happen to the entire family. This is Stockholm syndrome happened in a very short period of time to fully developed grown adults. Children don't stand a chance in these situations, and they need the doctors, the judges, the lawyers, all professionals to come in and say children are being abused by this process. What can we do to help them?
Right. That's very very sad that children, because it's just going to affect generation over generation, and we'll end up having a lot of sick people, unfortunately.
So,
Our
well,
time, our time is up. Um, Thank you, Bill. It was very informative. I was just quietly listening to you and Joe going back and forth.
yeah, no problem.
It
Thank
was
you.
nice. Very, very good information. And actually, I've never come across these associative behaviors. So I'm gonna go research about it today. Very, very good, very, very good information.
Yes, it was. It's another avenue to look at for treatment for children in these situations.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you. Thanks to our audience as well. Um, you know, the one thing that I'm doing, very quick one, is I want to produce an hour video, an impact video, with different stories from different people. Right? Basically, anybody who's been alienated, basically, I want to hear from them. How has that affected them, and the children. And so I posted something this morning, basically trying to get people to, participate. It's just 10 minutes short video, and so far I've had responses from two people plus one expert
Excellent.
who want to participate. So I'm looking for 10 people so far. With 10, we can produce two separate videos. So I'm looking forward to people reaching out to me for an interest to participate. And if you know anybody, Bill, that wants to do that short video, I know you'd be interested, and I'll be more than happy. Uh, you know, um, to schedule a time. It's a pre-recorded, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'd be very happy to
so
do one.
yeah. So all right. Thank you so much to our audience, and Bill, I'm just gonna end the broadcast, and then I'll be official.